The scream that tore through the grand hall wasn't from pain. It was from a 5-year-old pup's broken heart. Little Sven's teeth had barely grazed Luna Ingrid's perfectly manicured hand, but the words that followed shattered everything Alpha Bjorn had built in the 3 months since he brought his new mate home. I want my mom back. I want my real mom back. The entire pack froze. The celebration stopped. And in that moment, everyone realized that this wasn't just about a new Luna. This was about a family being erased. Before we dive into what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story gets darker, more twisted, and more heartbreaking than you can imagine. And listen, I share these stories because I believe someone out there needs to hear them. Someone needs to know they're not alone in their struggles. So tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I want to send you a virtual hug because by the end of this, you're going to need it. Now let's rewind and see how Alpha Bjorn destroyed everything his first mate built. 6 months earlier, Luna Astrid was the heart of the Silver Pine pack. Not because she was the strongest or the most feared, but because she understood something that most Lunas never grasp. Power isn't about dominance. It's about connection. Every morning before the sun painted the forest gold, Astrid would walk through the pack grounds. Not as their Luna, but as their sister, their mother, their friend. She knew every name, every story, every struggle. When Omega Freya's daughter got sick, Astrid didn't send a healer. She went herself, staying up 3 nights in a row, brewing remedies her own mother had taught her. When the teenage wolves struggled with their first shifts, Astrid held training sessions that felt less like boot camp and more like family gatherings. She taught them that strength wasn't about hiding fear. It was about transforming it into something beautiful. The pack didn't just respect Astrid. They loved her. And that love extended to her son, little Sven. At 5 years old, Sven was a carbon copy of his mother. Gentle brown eyes that seemed to see straight into your soul. A laugh that could make even the grumpiest warriors smile. He hadn't shifted yet, but everyone knew he would be special. Not because of his alpha bloodline, but because he had inherited his mother's gift for making people feel seen. Sven spent his days following his mother around, asking a million questions, helping her with pack duties in his own adorable way. When Astrid organized the weekly community meals, Sven would carefully arrange flowers on every table. When she held council meetings, he would sit quietly in the corner, drawing pictures of wolves and families and love. His favorite thing in the world was bedtime, when Astrid would shift into her wolf form and let him curl up against her warm fur while she told him stories of their ancestors. "Mama," he would whisper, his small fingers tangled in her silver-white coat, "will I be a good wolf like you?" And Astrid would nuzzle him with her snout, her wolf voice rumbling in his mind through their bond. "You already are, my little moon. You already are." Alpha Bjorn watched these moments from a distance. He loved his mate and his son, but love for Bjorn was abstract. It was duty and tradition and bloodlines. He provided. He protected. He ruled. That was what alphas did. The emotional labor, the connection, the heart of the pack, that was Astrid's domain, and he was content to let her have it. Until the accident. The rogue attack came without warning on a cold autumn evening. They'd been getting reports of a rogue pack moving through the territory, but nothing suggested they would be bold enough to strike at the heart of Silverpine. Astrid had been visiting the eastern border homes, bringing supplies to the families stationed there. She always went personally. She always insisted on it, despite Bjorn's protests that such tasks could be delegated. "Our pack members aren't tasks, Bjorn," she would say with that patient smile that drove him crazy. "They're family." The rogues ambushed her small escort. 3 wolves against 15. Astrid fought like the Luna she was, her silver wolf a blur of protective fury. She held them off long enough for her guards to get the Omega families to safety. But numbers eventually overwhelm even the bravest heart. When Bjorn arrived with reinforcements, the rogues had fled. And Astrid lay in a pool of her own blood, her breathing shallow, her silver coat stained crimson. She lived long enough to make it back to the pack house. Long enough for the healers to try everything. long enough for Sven to crawl into the bed beside her, crying for his mama to wake up. Bjorn stood outside the healing room. His fists clenched so hard his claws drew blood from his own palms. Inside, his mate was dying, and there was nothing his alpha strength could do to stop it. When the head healer, old Eric, finally emerged with tears in his ancient eyes, Bjorn already knew. "She's asking for you and the boy," Eric said quietly. "It won't be long now." Bjorn picked up Sven, who was sobbing uncontrollably, and carried him into the room. Astrid's eyes flickered open when she heard them. Even now at death's door she smiled. Always that smile. "My loves," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her hand reached for Sven, and the boy grabbed it with both of his small hands, holding on as if he could keep her in this world through sheer will. "Mama, don't go," Sven begged. "Please don't go. I'll be good. I promise I'll be so good." "Oh, my little moon." Astrid's tears mixed with blood on her cheeks. "You are already the best boy in the whole world. You are my greatest gift." She looked at Bjorn then, and something passed between them. "Plea. Command. Take care of our son. Promise me. Not just his body but his heart. He needs love, Bjorn. Not just protection." "I promise," Bjorn said, his voice breaking in a way the pack had never heard before. "And Bjorn," Astrid's grip on his hand tightened with surprising strength, "don't let grief make you forget how to feel. The pack needs a Luna, yes, but Sven needs his father more than anything. Don't let anyone replace me in his heart too quickly. Let him grieve. Let him heal. Let him." Her words cut off as a violent cough racked her body. Blood spilled from her lips. And then, with her hand in her son's and her eyes on her mate's face, Luna Astrid of the Silverpine pack took her last breath. The howl that erupted from Bjorn's chest was answered by every wolf in the territory. It was a sound of pure anguish, of a bond severed, of a world shattered. But the sound that haunted everyone who heard it was Sven's screaming. The 5-year-old didn't understand death. He only knew his mother wasn't moving, wasn't smiling, wasn't calling him her little moon anymore. "Wake up! Mama, wake up! Mama!" They had to carry the boy away. He fought and kicked and screamed for 3 hours straight before exhaustion finally claimed him. And when he woke up the next morning, the first thing he did was run to his mother's room, certain it had all been a nightmare. Finding her bed empty broke him all over again. The funeral was held under a full moon, as tradition demanded. The entire pack gathered, hundreds of wolves howling their grief to the sky. Astrid's body was laid to rest in the Luna's Grove, a sacred place where all the pack's Lunas were buried. Sven stood beside his father, small and lost in his black clothes, clutching a drawing he'd made of his mother. He placed it on her chest before they lowered her into the earth. "So she won't be lonely," he whispered. The days that followed were dark. Sven stopped talking. He stopped eating. He would wander the pack house looking for his mother, his small voice calling out, "Mama? Mama, where are you?" Until someone would find him and hold him while he cried. Bjorn tried. He truly did. But comfort was not a language he spoke fluently. He held his son. He stayed close. But there was a wall between them now, built from grief and confusion and a 5-year-old's inability to understand why his whole world had ended. The pack tried to help. Omega Freja, whose daughter Astrid had saved, took Sven in during the days, trying to give him some normalcy. The warriors' mates brought toys and treats, anything to make the boy smile. But Sven remained lost in his grief, a small ghost wandering through rooms that used to ring with his laughter. Bjorn threw himself into alpha duties. Hunting down the rogues who killed Astrid became an obsession. He led patrol after patrol, pushing himself and his warriors to exhaustion. He told himself he was doing it for justice, for the pack, for Astrid's memory. But really he was running. Running from the empty bed. Running from the son whose eyes looked so much like his dead mates. Running from the guilt that whispered in his mind every night. If he had gone with her, if he had insisted on more guards, if he had been there. The pack understood. They gave their alpha space to grieve. They stepped up, supporting each other the way Astrid had taught them. They took care of Sven when Bjorn couldn't. They held the pack together when their alpha was falling apart. For 2 months this worked. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. Then Ingrid arrived. She came from the Winterfell pack up north, ostensibly to pay respects and discuss a trade agreement. Ingrid was everything Astrid wasn't. Where Astrid had been warm and approachable, Ingrid was cool and sophisticated. Where Astrid dressed simply and practically, Ingrid wore designer clothes that screamed wealth and status. Where Astrid's beauty had been natural and understated, Ingrid's was carefully constructed, all sharp angles and calculated allure. She was also ambitious. Dangerously so. Ingrid took one look at the grieving alpha and the leaderless pack and saw opportunity. She'd been her father's disappointment back in Winterfell, smart and strong, but not strong enough to challenge her brother for alpha position. Marrying into power was her only path to becoming a Luna, and Bjorn was the perfect target. Vulnerable, available, desperate. She played it perfectly. The first few days she was simply helpful, offering advice on pack management from an outsider's perspective, organizing things that had fallen by the wayside in the chaos of grief. She was subtle, never overstepping, always deferring to Bjorn's authority. She made herself useful without making herself threatening. Then she started focusing on Bjorn personally. A hand on his arm during discussions. Concerned questions about how he was holding up. Offers to listen if he needed to talk. She found him late one night in his office, drowning in paperwork and whiskey, and instead of judging, she simply sat with him. She didn't try to fix him. She just stayed. For Bjorn, who had been alone with his grief for so long, it was intoxicating. Here was someone who wasn't crying every time they looked at him. Someone who didn't expect him to have answers. Someone who made him feel like an alpha again instead of a widower. The pack saw it happening. They whispered in corners, worried but unsure what to do. Freyja tried to warn Bjorn. She's not like Astrid, alpha. She doesn't have the same heart for the people. But Bjorn, in his grief and loneliness, mistook efficiency for strength and calculation for wisdom. The pack needs a Luna, he said, more to convince himself than anyone else. Sven needs a mother. That last part was the lie he told himself to justify what he wanted. Because the truth was, Bjorn needed Ingrid. He needed to feel something other than crushing grief. He needed to believe he could move forward, that life could continue, that he could be whole again. And Ingrid made him feel that way, even if it was all carefully constructed manipulation. 3 months after Astrid's death, Bjorn announced his intention to take Ingrid as his mate. Pack was shocked. 3 months. Had been 3 months. Most wolves grieved their mates for years before even considering another bond. But Bjorn was alpha, and alphas didn't ask permission. The only person whose opinion mattered, whose pain should have stopped everything, was Sven. And nobody asked Sven. When Bjorn told his son that Ingrid would be his new mother, the boy's reaction was immediate and visceral. "No. I have a mama. I don't want a new one." "Your mama is gone, Sven," Bjorn said, and oh, how those words lacked the gentleness Astrid would have used. "Ingrid will take care of you now. I don't want her to take care of me. I want mama." Bjorn lost his patience then. His own pain manifesting as anger. "Your mother is dead. She's not coming back. We have to move on." Sven ran from the room crying, and Bjorn let him go. He told himself the boy would adjust. Children were resilient. This was for the best. All lies. All convenient lies. The mating ceremony happened a week later. It was nothing like Bjorn's first mating with Astrid, which had been a joyous celebration that lasted 3 days. This was a formal, somber affair. The pack attended because tradition demanded it, but the joy was absent. They accepted Ingrid as their Luna because they had no choice, but they didn't embrace her. Not like they had embraced Astrid. Sven refused to attend. He locked himself in his room and wouldn't come out, even when Bjorn commanded it. In the end, Freyja stayed with him while the ceremony proceeded, holding the sobbing child and wondering what had happened to the alpha who had promised his dying mate he would protect their son's heart. The real nightmare began when Ingrid moved into the pack house. She didn't waste time with subtlety anymore. Her position was secured. Now came the reshaping. The first thing she did was redecorate. Astrid's warm, homey touches, the photos on every surface, the handmade quilts, the children's artwork covering the refrigerator. All of it disappeared. In its place came cold, modern minimalism. Gray and white and chrome. Beautiful in a magazine spread sort of way, but utterly devoid of warmth. When Sven came home from Freja's house to find his drawings gone, replaced by abstract art he didn't understand, he started crying. "Where are my pictures? Where's Mama's stuff?" "This is my home now," Ingrid said coolly. "We're making a fresh start. You need to move on from the past, Sven." "I don't want to move on. I want Mama." Ingrid's eyes narrowed. "Your Mama is dead. I'm your mother now, and you will respect me as such. You're not my mother. You'll never be my mother." The slap came so fast that Sven didn't see it coming. Not hard enough to truly hurt, but shocking enough to make him stumble back, his hand flying to his cheek. Ingrid stood over him, her face twisted in anger. "You will not speak to me that way. I am your Luna. You will show respect." Sven ran to find his father, but Bjorn was in a pack meeting. When he finally told him what happened hours later, Bjorn's response crushed what little hope remained in the boy's heart. "You need to give Ingrid a chance, Sven. She's right. You need to show respect. This is hard for everyone, but we're a family now." "We're not a family. She's mean. She hit me." "Discipline isn't abuse, son. You need to learn boundaries. Ingrid is trying to help you." That's when Sven stopped trusting his father. That's when the boy realized he was truly alone. The changes came rapidly after that. Ingrid implemented new rules. Children were to be seen and not heard in the main pack house. No running in the halls. No noise after 8 p.m. Pack members needed appointments to see the Luna, whereas Astrid had maintained an open-door policy. The communal meals that Astrid had organized weekly were discontinued. Too much work, too informal, beneath the dignity of a Luna. The pack members who dared to question these changes were met with Ingrid's cold fury and Bjorn's unwavering support of his new mate. Slowly dissent died. People learned to keep their heads down. The warmth Astrid had cultivated began to freeze over. For Sven, life became a series of losses. His mother's garden, which he used to help tend, was paved over for a meditation space Ingrid never used. His mother's scent, which had lingered in the pack house for weeks after her death, was erased by industrial cleaners and Ingrid's overwhelming perfume. The nightly stories, the warm hugs, the unconditional love, all gone, replaced by rules and punishments and a stepmother who saw him as an obstacle to overcome. Sven retreated into himself. He spent as much time as possible at Freja's house, or with the other Omega families who had loved his mother. They became his refuge, his real family. They kept Astrid's memory alive for him in ways his father wouldn't. They let him talk about her. They let him cry. They let him be a 5-year-old boy grieving his mother instead of forcing him to move on. But he still had to go home. And home was becoming more unbearable every day. Ingrid's resentment of Sven grew with each passing week. Every time she looked at the boy, she saw Astrid. Every time Bjorn showed his son any attention, she felt it was attention stolen from her. Every time pack members smiled at Sven or showed him affection, she remembered that they had loved his mother more than they would ever love her. So she set out to break him. Little cruelties at first. Forgetting to save him dinner. Giving away his favorite toys to other children, because he was too old for them. Punishing him for infractions other children got away with. Always with plausible deniability. Always with Bjorn's support or worse, his oblivious absence. Sven needs structure, she would tell Bjorn. Astrid was too soft on him. He's spoiled and needs to learn discipline. And Bjorn, who wanted peace in his house more than he wanted truth, believed her. Or chose to believe her. It amounted to the same thing. The final preparation for disaster came when Ingrid discovered she was pregnant. Her triumph was immediate and complete. Now she would give Bjorn what she told him Astrid never could: multiple heirs, a strong legacy, a proper alpha family. Never mind that Astrid had nearly died giving birth to Sven, that the healers had warned another pregnancy might kill her, that she had sacrificed her own life protecting the pack's weakest members. In Ingrid's narrative, she was the upgrade, the better version, the Luna Bjorn should have had all along. She announced the pregnancy at a pack gathering, and Bjorn's joy was genuine and complete. He would be a father again. A chance to do it right this time, to be present in a way he hadn't been for Sven. He didn't notice his first son's face crumbling. He didn't see the boy slip away from the celebration, heading to his room to cry alone. Freyja noticed. She found Sven curled up in his closet, the only space that still felt safe, sobbing into a blanket that used to belong to his mother. "They're going to replace me," he whispered. "They're going to have a new baby and forget all about me and Mama." "No, sweetheart." Freyja held him close, her own heart breaking. "No one could ever replace you." But they both knew, even then, that something fundamental had shifted. And it was only going to get worse. Ingrid's pregnancy became the center of everything. Bjorn doted on her, attending to her every need and whim. The pack house revolved around her comfort. And Sven became even more invisible, just another piece of furniture in the background of his father's new life. Until the day of the incident. The day everything shattered. Ingrid decided to host a celebration. Not for the pregnancy announcement, that had already happened. This was something else. This was her formal introduction to the extended pack network, inviting alphas and lunas from neighboring territories to meet Silverpine's new Luna. It was her chance to establish herself as a power player, to prove she was more than just Bjorn's rebound. She planned it for weeks, obsessing over every detail. The pack house was decorated like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Caterers were brought in from the city. Everything had to be perfect. This was her debut, her moment to shine. Sven was instructed to be on his best behavior. He was to greet the guests politely, smile for photos, and then disappear to his room. He was to be the perfect little alpha heir, proof that Ingrid could manage Bjorn's family as efficiently as she managed everything else. The boy complied because he had no choice. He put on the uncomfortable formal clothes Ingrid had picked out for him. He stood beside his father and stepmother as guests arrived, shaking hands and murmuring greetings. He was the picture of a well-behaved child. But inside Sven was drowning. Every smile his father gave Ingrid was a knife. Every time Bjorn introduced her as my mate and the pack's Luna without mentioning Astrid, even in past tense, was a betrayal. Every compliment the visiting wolves paid to the new Luna felt like they were erasing his mother's memory. When Alpha Magnus from the Ironwood pack arrived with his Luna, Hildur, they made a show of congratulating Bjorn and Ingrid. Hildur, a sharp-eyed woman with steel-gray hair, studied the proceedings with interest. "Such a beautiful family," she said, though her eyes lingered on Sven. "And young Sven here. He must be so happy to have a new mother." Everyone froze. The pack members who had been listening nearby held their breath. Bjorn's jaw tightened, and Ingrid smiled that cold, calculated smile. "We're all adjusting wonderfully," Ingrid said, placing a possessive hand on Sven's shoulder. The boy flinched but didn't pull away. "Sven has been so welcoming. Haven't you, darling?" The endearment was poison in her mouth. Sven's hands curled into fists at his sides. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run. He wanted to tell everyone the truth about who Ingrid really was, about the cruelty hidden behind her perfect mask. But he was 5 years old and terrified and completely alone. So he nodded. "Yes, Luna." The formal address from a son to a stepmother made several wolves exchange uncomfortable glances. But Ingrid's smile widened. She had trained him well. "Such a good boy," she said, and then, in a move that would prove catastrophic, she reached down to pat his head like he was a pet. Something in Sven snapped. The touch was so condescending, so dismissive, so utterly unlike his mother's gentle affection. And in that moment, with all these strangers praising his father's new life and pretending his mother had never existed, the dam broke. His wolf surged forward. Sven hadn't shifted yet. 5 was too young for most pups. But the wolf was there, lurking under his skin, fed by grief and rage and desperate love for a mother who would never come back. And that wolf wanted to protect them both from this woman who was trying to erase them. Sven's mouth opened, and instead of words, a growl emerged. A deep, primal sound that didn't belong in a child's throat. Several guests gasped. Bjorn stepped forward, confused and alarmed. And Ingrid, seeing her perfect moment crumbling, made a fatal mistake. She grabbed Sven's arm hard, her fingers digging in, and leaned down to hiss in his ear. "Control yourself. You're embarrassing me." The world slowed down. Later, witnesses would swear they saw the boy's eyes flash gold for just a second. They would say they felt a surge of power that shouldn't have been possible from a pup who hadn't experienced his first shift. Sven yanked his arm free from Ingrid's grip and did something no one expected. His teeth, still just baby teeth, caught the flesh of her hand as she reached for him again. It wasn't a serious bite. Barely broke the skin. But the symbolism was unmistakable. A wolf rejecting a Luna. Ingrid screamed, more from shock than pain, jerking her hand back. Blood welled from the small puncture wounds, dripping onto the pristine white carpet. The room erupted in chaos. Guests backed away. Pack warriors stepped forward, unsure whether to protect their Luna or the Alpha's son. And Bjorn stood frozen, watching his two worlds collide. But the bite wasn't the moment that destroyed everything. It was what came next. Sven, his small chest heaving, his eyes wild with all the pain and rage he'd been holding back for 3 months, looked at his father. And then, in front of the entire assembled pack and their guests, he screamed the words that had been building inside him since the day Bjorn brought Ingrid home. "I want my mom back." The raw anguish in those words hit like a physical blow. Several wolves actually staggered. Freyja, standing in the doorway with the other Omegas, started crying. And Bjorn felt his heart crack in a way it hadn't even at Astrid's funeral. "I want my real mom," Sven continued, tears streaming down his face. "I don't want her. I don't want any of this. I want Mama. I want Mama back." He was sobbing now, the words barely intelligible. All the grief he'd been forced to swallow, all the loss he'd been told to get over, all the pain he'd been carrying alone. It erupted like a volcano, devastating and unstoppable. "She's mean. She's not like Mama. She doesn't love me. Nobody loves me anymore. Mama loved me and you let her die and now you don't even say her name. You act like she never existed. But I remember. I remember." Bjorn took a step toward his son, his hand outstretched. "Sven." "No." The boy backed away, his small body shaking. "You promised Mama you'd take care of me. You promised. But you forgot. You forgot her and you forgot me and now you're having a new baby and I'll be all alone and Mama would hate this. She would hate you for this." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Every wolf present felt the truth of it. Astrid, gentle Astrid who had loved her family and her pack with everything she had, would indeed have hated what her mate had done. Would have been devastated to see her son in such pain. Would have fought tooth and claw to protect his heart the way she couldn't protect her own body. Hilda from Ironwood broke the silence, her voice cutting through the chaos with brutal clarity. "Perhaps the boy has a point, Alpha Bjorn. 3 months is quite fast." Ingrid rounded on her, fury replacing her shock. "How dare you? I dare because I'm a guest in your territory and I have no allegiance to your pride," Hilda said coldly. "That child is in agony. Anyone with eyes can see it. And instead of addressing his grief, you've slapped a bandage over it in the form of a new mate and expected everything to be fine." Other guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one contradicted her. The tension in the room was suffocating. Bjorn finally found his voice. "Sven, go to your room. Now." "No." The single word from the 5-year-old was almost funny in its defiance. I'm not going. You can't make me. You can't make me pretend anymore. Sven. Bjorn's alpha command began to seep into his voice, that irresistible power that forced obedience. But before he could fully deploy it, something unexpected happened. Old Eric, the head healer who had served the pack for 40 years, who had delivered Bjorn himself and had closed Astrid's eyes in death, stepped forward. Stop! His voice was quiet but firm. Alpha Bjorn, I have served your family for 4 decades. I have never questioned your authority. But I am questioning it now. The room went completely silent. A healer challenging an alpha was unheard of. That boy, Eric pointed at Sven, has lost his mother. He watched her die. He hasn't been allowed to properly grieve because you were too busy dealing with your own pain to notice his. And now you're using your alpha power to silence him. To force him into submission when he finally finds the courage to speak his truth. Bjorn's face darkened. You overstep, Eric. Perhaps. But someone needs to. Eric walked to Sven and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Luna Astrid made me promise something before she died. She made me promise to look after her son if you failed to. I'm ashamed it took me this long to honor that promise. Ingrid's voice was shrill with indignation. This is outrageous. Bjorn, are you going to let him speak to you this way? But Bjorn couldn't look away from his son. Sven had stopped crying, but the tears kept flowing silently down his cheeks. He looked so small, so broken. And for the first time in 3 months, Bjorn really saw him. Saw the weight of grief the boy had been carrying. Saw the isolation, the fear, the desperate loneliness. Saw, reflected in his son's eyes, the promise he had broken to the woman he had loved. Everyone out, Bjorn said quietly. What? Ingrid sputtered. Bjorn, we can't, the celebration, our guests. I said out. The alpha roar shook the walls. Guests scrambled for the exits. Pack members cleared the room in seconds. Even Ingrid's protests died in her throat at the sheer fury in her mate's voice. Within minutes, the grand hall was empty except for Bjorn, Sven, and Eric. The healer made to leave, giving them privacy, but Bjorn stopped him. Hey, please. The alpha sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. I think I need a witness. To make sure I don't fail again. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and felt shame crash over him like a wave. When had Sven gotten so thin? When had those shadows appeared under his eyes? When had his little boy started carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders? Sven, Bjorn's voice cracked. Come here, son. The boy didn't move. Fear and distrust warred on his face. Please. Bjorn held out his arms, the same arms that used to lift Sven high into the air, that used to carry him on long patrol walks, that used to hold him close during thunderstorms. Please, Sven. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Something in his father's voice broke through Sven's defenses. Slowly, hesitantly, the boy walked forward. When he was close enough, Bjorn swept him up and held him tight, feeling the small body shake with renewed sobs. I'm sorry, Bjorn whispered into his son's hair. I'm sorry I forgot my promise. I'm sorry I tried to replace your mother. I'm sorry I let you hurt alone. I'm so sorry, Sven. Father and son cried together. Grief finally shared instead of endured in isolation. Eric watched with tears in his own old eyes, grateful that perhaps, maybe, it wasn't too late after all. When the storm of emotion finally passed, Bjorn pulled back to look at his son. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. And Sven did. The words poured out of him in a flood. About Ingrid's cruelties. About feeling erased and forgotten. About the pack house that no longer felt like home. About missing his mother so much it physically hurt. About being terrified of the new baby because it meant he would matter even less. Bjorn listened to every word, his face growing darker with each revelation. When Sven finished, the alpha looked at Eric. Did you know? Some of it. Pack. We've been worried. But you're the alpha. And Ingrid is your mate. We didn't know how to. You should have told me. Bjorn's voice was hard. You all should have told me. I may be alpha, but I'm not infallible. And I was clearly failing. We're telling you now, Eric said gently. Bjorn nodded slowly. Then he looked down at Sven. I need to make this right. But I need to know what you need. What would make you feel safe again? Sven's answer was immediate. I want to remember Mama. I want her pictures back. I want to talk about her without everyone getting weird. I want her garden back. I want. He faltered, then finished in a whisper. I want to know you still love her. That you didn't just forget her. I never forgot her, Sven. Not for 1 second. Bjorn cupped his son's face in his hands. I was drowning in grief, and instead of learning to swim, I grabbed onto the first piece of driftwood I saw. But that was my failure, not yours. And it's not too late to fix this. The alpha stood, still holding his son, and made a decision that would change everything. Eric, call a pack meeting. Everyone. Right now. Within the hour, the entire Silverpine pack had assembled in the Great Hall. Ingrid stood to the side, her hand bandaged, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. She knew something had shifted. She could feel her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Bjorn stood before his pack with Sven in his arms. The boy's face was still tear-stained, but he wasn't hiding anymore. And when his father began to speak, every wolf present understood they were witnessing something monumental. 3 months ago I made a decision, Bjorn said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I told myself it was for the good of the pack. I told myself my son needed a mother. I told myself it was time to move forward. But I was lying. To all of you. To my son. And most of all to myself. Ingrid's sharp intake of breath was audible. She stepped forward. Bjorn, what are you? I'm speaking. The alpha command in his voice stopped her cold. You'll get your turn. He looked out at his pack, seeing their faces properly for the first time in months. These wolves who had loved his mate. Who had tried to protect his son when he wouldn't. Who had held everything together while he fell apart. I dishonored Luna Astrid's memory. Not by finding new love, she would have wanted me to be happy eventually. But by rushing. By erasing her. By forcing my son to accept a replacement mother before he'd even begun to process losing his real one. By choosing my own comfort over his well-being. Bjorn's voice broke, but he pushed on. Tonight, my 5-year-old son had to scream in front of strangers just to be heard. He had to bite someone to make me pay attention. And the shame of that will stay with me for the rest of my life. He set Sven down gently but kept a hand on his shoulder. This pack was built on love and connection. Luna Astrid understood that. She lived it every day. And in my grief, I let someone who doesn't share those values take her place. That ends tonight. Now he turned to Ingrid. His face was hard, but his voice was surprisingly gentle. You're a strong wolf, Ingrid. Intelligent, capable, organized. But you're not right for this pack. You don't understand what we are. What Astrid built. And I was wrong to think you could. You're rejecting me. Ingrid's voice was ice. In front of the entire pack. While I'm carrying your child. I'm setting you free, Bjorn corrected. The mate bond was never completed. We never sealed it under the full moon. You know that. It can still be severed cleanly. The truth of it hung in the air. In their rush to mate, they'd skipped the final bonding ceremony. Probably because some part of Bjorn hadn't been ready. Some part of him had known. Ingrid's face twisted through a dozen emotions. Rage, humiliation, calculation, and finally, cold pragmatism. Fine. But I want compensation. A territory of my own. Resources. And you will acknowledge this child as your heir. If the child is mine, they will be acknowledged and provided for. Bjorn agreed. But Sven is my heir. That's non-negotiable. As for territory, we'll negotiate terms that are fair. You won't leave here with nothing, Ingrid. But you will leave. For a moment it looked like Ingrid might fight. Might argue or plead or try to salvage something from the wreckage. But she was too smart for that. She'd lost and she knew it. Better to retreat with dignity and resources than to be thrown out with nothing. "I'll be gone by morning," she said coldly. Then she looked at Sven, and something almost like regret flickered in her eyes. "You won. Are you happy now, child?" Sven, still pressed against his father's side, met her gaze steadily. "I just wanted my dad back. And to remember my mom. That's all I ever wanted." Ingrid had no response to that. She turned and left the hall, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Several wolves who had come with her from Winterfell followed, loyal to their former pack member rather than to Silverpine. When the door closed behind them, the hall erupted. Not in celebration exactly, but in a collective exhale of relief. The pressure that had been building for 3 months finally released. Freyja was the first to approach, tears streaming down her kind face. She knelt before Sven. "You were so brave, little one. Your mama would be so proud. Can we talk about her now?" Sven asked, his voice small but hopeful. "Can I remember her without making people sad?" "You can talk about her always," Bjorn said, kneeling beside his son. "In fact, I want you to. I want to hear every memory, every story, every moment you shared with her. 'Cause I realized something tonight, Sven. Your mother isn't just gone. She lives in you. In your kindness. In your courage. In that big, loving heart of yours. And by trying to forget her, I was trying to erase the best parts of you too." The boy threw his arms around his father's neck and held on tight. Around them, the pack began to relax, to smile, to feel hope for the first time in months. Eric approached with a thoughtful expression. "Alpha, if I may make a suggestion. Always, old friend. The pack has been without a Luna's touch for too long. But perhaps we don't need to fill that role immediately. Perhaps we need something else first." "What do you mean?" Eric smiled. "We need to heal. All of us. We need to grieve properly, to honor Astrid's memory. And to rediscover who we are as a pack. That takes time. Takes community. And it takes leadership from an alpha who's present, not drowning in guilt or rushing to fix everything." Bjorn considered this, then nodded slowly. "You're right. We do this together. As a pack. As a family." He stood addressing everyone. "Effective immediately, we're making changes. We're going back to Astrid's ways. Open door policy for the Luna's office, which will remain vacant but available for anyone who needs a space. Weekly community meals resume. The garden gets replanted. And every full moon, we gather to share stories of our Luna, to keep her memory alive not just for Sven, but for all of us." The approval from the pack was unanimous and enthusiastic. This was what they'd been waiting for. This was the alpha they remembered. In the days that followed, the transformation was remarkable. Ingrid left as promised, taking a generous settlement and a promise of support for the child if it proved to be Bjorn's. The coldness she'd brought to the pack house melted away as warmth returned. Sven helped replant his mother's garden, his small hands digging in the earth alongside pack members who had loved Astrid. They told him stories about her as they worked. About the time she'd convinced the stubborn elder wolves to try new training methods. About how she'd sneak extra desserts to the Omega children. About the way she could make anyone feel heard and valued with just a few words. The photos came back out. Astrid's artwork returned to the walls. Her favorite recipes were cooked in the pack kitchen. And slowly, painfully, but beautifully, they all began to heal. Bjorn threw himself into being the father Astrid had believed he could be. He cut back on patrols to spend evenings with Sven. They established rituals. Reading before bed, morning walks in the forest, weekend projects building things with their hands. Bjorn learned to talk about feelings, stumbling at first, but getting better with practice. One night, about a month after Ingrid's departure, Sven came to his father with a question. "Papa, do you think Mama can see us? From wherever she is?" Bjorn pulled his son onto his lap, considering carefully. "I don't know for certain, Sven. But I believe she can. I believe she's watching over us, proud of how brave you've been. Do you think she's mad at you? For the Ingrid thing. The directness of children could be brutal. Bjorn took a breath. I think she was probably disappointed. But I also think she forgave me because that's who your mother was. She believed people could grow and change and do better. Are you doing better? I'm trying. Every day. Am I getting it right? Sven thought about this seriously. Then he nodded. Yeah. You're getting it right now. Those simple words meant more to Bjorn than any pack victory or territorial gain. He held his son close, breathing in the scent of him. Milk and honey and something uniquely Sven. I love you, little moon. The endearment which Astrid had used made Sven smile. Mama called me that. I know. Is it okay if I do too? Yeah, like it. It makes me feel like she's still here a little bit. She is here, Sven. Always. In every kind thing you do, every time you show compassion, every time you love someone. That's your mama living through you. The first full moon gathering to honor Astrid's memory was attended by the entire pack. They gathered in the Luna's grove where she was buried. Hundreds of wolves forming a circle around her resting place. One by one they came forward to share memories. Freyja spoke of the time Astrid had saved her daughter, staying by the sick child's bedside for 3 days without sleep. A warrior named Torsten told how Astrid had talked him through his first shift, patient and encouraging when he felt like a monster. Young Omega children shared how she'd made them feel special and important, never less than because of their rank. And Sven, with his father's hand on his shoulder for support, told everyone about his favorite memory. Mama used to shift into her wolf and let me ride on her back through the forest. She'd run really fast and I'd hold on to her fur and feel like we were flying. And she'd tell me stories in my mind about the moon goddess and brave wolves and how love is the strongest power in the world. She said that no matter what happened, as long as I remembered to love, I'd never really be lost. There wasn't a dry eye in the grove. When the sharing ended, the pack howled together, their voices rising to the full moon above. It was a sound of grief, yes, but also of love, of remembrance, of a promise to carry Astrid's legacy forward. Months passed. Seasons changed. Sven had his first shift on a spring evening. His small wolf form silver-white like his mother's had been. He was so proud and excited, running circles around his father, yipping happily. The pack celebrated for days. Ingrid's child was born, a daughter, and tests confirmed Bjorn was indeed the father. He established a trust for the girl and visitation rights, determined to be present in her life even if he couldn't be with her mother. Ingrid had remarried, finding an alpha in a distant pack who valued ambition over connection. From what Bjorn heard, they were well suited. The Silver Pine pack healed. Not quickly and not without setbacks, but steadily. They learned to talk about Astrid without crying every time. They learned to celebrate her life rather than just mourning her death. And they learned that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. It meant carrying the best parts of the past into the future. Bjorn never took another mate. Some alphas suggested he should, for the good of the pack, but he refused. I have a family, he would say. I have a son who needs me. I have a pack that needs leadership, not a Luna chosen out of obligation. If love comes again someday, I'll welcome it. But I won't force it. And I won't rush it. Sven grew into a remarkable young wolf. He had his mother's gift for making people feel valued and his father's strength of will. By the time he was 10, he was already showing signs of being an extraordinary future alpha. Not through dominance or power, but through connection and compassion. One evening, Sven and Bjorn sat in the rebuilt garden, watching the sun set. The flowers Astrid had loved bloomed all around them, tended by pack members who had made it their mission to keep this place beautiful in her honor. Papa, Sven said thoughtfully, I was thinking about that night, when I bit Ingrid and screamed at everyone. What about it? I was really scared afterwards. I thought maybe I'd ruined everything. That you'd hate me for embarrassing you. Bjorn pulled his son close. You saved us both that night, Sven. You found the courage to speak truth when everyone else, including me, was living a lie. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of. Do you think Mama would be proud? I know she would be. You're exactly the wolf she hoped you'd become. Sven was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that had been building in him for years. Will you tell me about the day I was born? Mama used to tell me, but I'm starting to forget some of the details. And Bjorn did. He told his son about Astrid's difficult labor, about her strength and determination, about the moment they first held their baby boy and she'd called him her little moon. He told stories through the evening and into the night, under stars that seemed to shine a little brighter, as if Astrid herself was listening. 'Cause maybe she was. The Silver Pine Pack never forgot their Luna. Generations later, they still told stories of Astrid. Her kindness, her wisdom, her sacrifice. They still maintained her garden. They still held full moon gatherings to honor her memory. She became legend, the standard by which all future Lunas were measured. But more importantly, her son carried her forward. Sven became alpha when Bjorn stepped down, and he led with his mother's compassion and his father's hard-won wisdom. He found a mate who understood that she wasn't replacing anyone, but rather continuing a legacy of love. And when his own children were born, he told them stories of the grandmother they'd never meet, but who had shaped everything good about their pack. The story could have ended in tragedy. A child forever broken by loss and betrayal. A pack fractured by rushed decisions and cold leadership. An alpha who learned too late that some mistakes can't be fixed. But it didn't end that way. Because one small boy found the courage to scream his truth. Because a father finally heard his son's pain and chose to act. Because a community refused to let grief destroy the love that had built them. And because sometimes, the loudest act of love is refusing to let someone be forgotten. Astrid lived on. In her son's gentle strength. In her pack's compassionate culture. In the garden that bloomed every spring. In the stories shared under full moons. In every act of kindness that rippled through the territory she had loved so much. She lived on because Sven made sure of it. Because he bit back against erasure. Because he screamed, "I want my mom back," and meant it with every fiber of his being. You can't bring the dead back to life, but you can keep them alive in memory, in legacy, in love that refuses to dim even when the light has gone out. That's what Sven learned. That's what Bjorn learned. And that's what the Silver Pine Pack carried forward, generation after generation. Because love doesn't die. Transforms. It adapts. It finds new ways to exist in a world that has changed. And sometimes, just sometimes, it gets a second chance to get things right. The night Sven became alpha, he stood in his mother's garden under a full moon and made a vow. "I promise to lead with your heart, Mama. To remember that power without compassion is tyranny. To see every pack member as family, not subjects. To never let ambition blind me to pain. And to teach my children what you taught me, that love is the strongest power in the world." A warm breeze stirred the flowers, carrying the scent of wild roses, Astrid's favorite. And Sven smiled, knowing in his bones that somewhere, somehow, his mother was smiling too. Because her little moon had become a sun, illuminating the path forward for an entire pack. And that, more than any monument or memorial, was the greatest tribute a son could give his mother. The story of Alpha Bjorn's terrible mistake became a cautionary tale, yes. But it also became a story of redemption. Of a father and son finding their way back to each other. Of a pack that refused to lose its soul. Of a 5-year-old boy whose scream echoed through the years, reminding everyone who heard it that some truths demand to be spoken, no matter the cost. And every time the Silver Pine Pack gathered under the full moon to honor their Lunas, past and present, they howled loudest for Astrid. Not in mourning anymore but in celebration. Because she hadn't just been a Luna. She had been the foundation upon which everything good was built. Sven made sure his children knew that. His grandchildren too. And so the legacy continued, passed down like precious heirlooms, each generation adding their own love to the collection. Years after that terrible night when everything shattered, Bjorn sat with his adult son and asked a question that had haunted him. "Do you forgive me, Sven, for what I put you through?" Sven considered this carefully. "I forgive you because you listened when I finally found the courage to speak. Because you chose me over your pride. Because you spent every day after that trying to be better. That's all anyone can ask, Papa. Not perfection. Just the genuine effort to do better." Your mother would have said something similar. She taught me that people are complicated. That they make mistakes. That what matters is what they do after the mistake. Do they hide and make excuses, or do they face it and grow? Bjorn smiled through tears. "You really are her son. And yours," Sven said firmly. "I'm both of you. The best parts of both of you. That's what I want to be." And he was. The final scene of our story takes place many years later. An elderly Bjorn, silver-haired and weathered but still strong, walks through the pack territory with his son. Sven's own children run ahead, laughing and playing, their joy a constant reminder of everything that had been salvaged from disaster. They stop at Astrid's grave. The headstone is covered in fresh flowers, placed there by pack members who never even met her but know her through stories. Bjorn kneels, his old bones protesting, and places his hand on the cool stone. "I did my best, love," he whispers. "Our boy became everything you hoped. The pack thrived. And not a day passed that you weren't remembered." Sven kneels beside his father, placing his own hand on the stone. "Thank you, Mama, for giving me courage. For loving me so much that even after you were gone I could feel it. For teaching me that it's okay to fight for the people you love." They sit in comfortable silence, two men bound by loss and love and the long journey of healing they'd walked together. Finally Bjorn speaks. "She'd be proud of you, Sven. But more than that, she'd be proud of us. For not giving up. For finding our way back to each other." "We almost didn't," Sven says honestly. "If I hadn't bitten Ingrid that night. If you hadn't found the courage to make me listen," Bjorn corrects. "Don't downplay what you did. You were a child standing up to an alpha and his mate. That took more bravery than any battle I've ever fought." They stand together, and as they walk back toward the pack house, Sven's children run to join them. The youngest, a little girl with silver-white fur in her wolf form, tugs on her grandfather's hand. "Grandpapa, tell us about Grandmama Astrid. Tell us about the garden and the songs and how she loved everyone." And Bjorn does. Because that's what they do in Silverpine. They remember. They honor. They keep the love alive. Because in the end, that's what the whole terrible, beautiful story was about. Not about betrayal or redemption, though those played their parts. Not about mistakes or forgiveness, though those were crucial too. It was about a simple, powerful truth. Love doesn't end when life does. It continues in the hearts of those left behind, in the lessons they carry forward, in the courage they find to speak up when silence would be easier. It continues in a 5-year-old boy's scream, "I want my mom back," and in the decades of love that followed, proving that sometimes in the most important ways, we can bring our loved ones back. Not in body but in spirit. Not in presence but in practice. Not in life but in legacy. That's the story of Silverpine Pack. That's the story of Alpha Bjorn's greatest failure and greatest triumph. That's the story of Luna Astrid, who died protecting her pack and lived forever in her son. But most of all, it's the story of Sven, the boy who refused to forget, who bit back against erasure, who loved his mother so fiercely that he changed the course of his entire pack's history. And that, more than anything else, is the power of love. It's not always gentle. It's not always quiet. Sometimes it bites. Sometimes it screams. Sometimes it demands to be heard no matter how uncomfortable that makes everyone. But it's always worth it. Always. Now I want to hear from you. Because I know some of you watching this are dealing with your own version of being erased or forgotten. Some of you have screamed your truth and wondered if anyone was listening. Some of you are the Svens of your story, fighting to keep a memory alive. And some of you might even be the Bjorns, realizing too late that you've made terrible mistakes. Whatever your story is, you're not alone. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from so I can send you a virtual hug. Because we all need to know that someone out there understands. That our pain matters. That our love matters. That we matter. Hit that subscribe button if this story touched you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, it's never too late to listen. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to honor the people we love by being better than we were yesterday. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for being part of this community. And thank you for understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to forget. Until next time, hold tight to the ones you love. Speak your truth, even when it's hard. And never, ever let anyone convince you that moving forward means leaving the past behind. Because the past isn't behind us. It's within us, shaping us, guiding us, giving us the strength to become who we're meant to be. Just like Astrid lives on in Sven. Just like love lives on in all of us. Forever.